The man screaming on the marble floor is Julian, the vice president of digital transformation. His $4,000 tuxedo is ripped at the shoulder. One of his Italian leather loafers has flown off, sliding across the polished floor like a rejected hockey puck. He is kicking, biting, and foaming at the mouth, pinned down by 3 federal agents. I am the system. You cannot touch me. I am the future. Standing 10 feet away, watching this spectacle with the cold indifference of a statue, is Elias. He holds a broken wired keyboard in one hand and a dirty brass key in the other. He does not smile. He does not gloat. He simply turns his back on the screaming executive and presses the down button on the service elevator. This is Julian. 5 minutes ago, he thought he was a god. He thought he could fire the laws of physics. The only sound in the sub-zero server room was the rhythmic, mechanical clack of an IBM Model M keyboard. It was the heartbeat of the global economy, manually regulating $400 million of overflowing data every single second. Stop, now. Elias did not look up. He felt the disruption before he heard the voice. The magnetic field around the server rack spiked. I said, "Stop, dinosaur." Julian stood there, violating every safety protocol in the manual. He was not wearing an anti-static wrist strap. He was wearing a silk short-sleeved shirt, leaning casually against the multi-million-dollar mainframe. In his hand, he toyed with a high-powered neodymium magnet, a desk toy he had brought down just to make a point. "Julian," Elias said, his voice low and steady. "Move the magnet. You are distorting the buffer arrays. If the parity bit flips, the London exchange locks up." "Let it lock," Julian sneered. He reached down, grabbed the thick, coiled cable of the keyboard, and yanked. The sound was sickening, a sharp snap of plastic and the tearing of copper wires. The rhythmic clack died instantly. The room fell into a terrifying, unnatural silence. "There," Julian said, dropping the dead keyboard onto the cold tiles. "I just saved the company the embarrassment of having a janitor running the core. We are migrating to the Titan cloud at midnight. No more manual overrides. No more clicking." Elias stared at the broken instrument. It was not just a keyboard. It was the rudder that steered the ship through the daily storm of global finance. "You did not just stop the clicking, Julian. You cut the brakes." "I cut the fat," Julian corrected. He stepped closer, invading the older man's personal space. And speaking of fat, he reached out and snatched the heavy brass key hanging from the neck of Elias. He did not unclasp it. He pulled it hard enough to snap the leather cord, leaving a red, stinging burn on the skin. "The 1982 Master Override," Julian mocked, holding the key up to the fluorescent light. "The key to the kingdom." "You know, the board actually believes this superstition. They think this piece of brass is magic." Julian walked over to a nearby equipment cart, where a bottle of $80 imported sparkling water sat. He looked at Elias, a cruel smile spreading across his face. "Watch closely, Elias. This is the only thing your magic key is good for in 2026. With a sharp pop, Julian used the edge of the master key to pry the cap off the bottle. He tossed the cap on the floor, took a long, arrogant sip, and then, with the casual indifference of a man who believes he is untouchable, he dropped the key into a trash can filled with wet coffee grounds and half-eaten sandwiches. "You have 10 minutes to clear your desk," Julian said, wiping his mouth. "Security will escort you out. Do not touch the key. It is company property now. I might need it for my second bottle." Elias stood up. He did not fight. He did not scream. He looked at the server rack, where a single tiny LED light had just turned from a steady green to a pulsing, angry amber. "It is not superstition, Julian," Elias said softly, picking up his box of personal items. "It is a pressure valve, and you just welded it shut." Julian laughed, waving a dismissive hand as Elias walked toward the heavy steel doors. "Go home, Grandpa. Watch the future happen on TV." As the door clicked shut behind Elias, Julian turned to his 2 assistants, Brad and Sarah, who were cowering in the corner with their iPads. "Well," Julian barked, "why are you not cheering? We just modernized the bank." Sarah looked at the trash can, then at the pulsing amber light on the server. "Sir, The latency just jumped by 400%. The buffer is filling up. Then hide it, Julian snapped. Override the sensors. Force the dashboard to show green. I have a gala to attend in 12 hours. And if I see a single red light on that screen, you will be joining the dinosaur in the unemployment line. The elevator ride down to the lobby felt like a funeral procession. Elias stood alone in the stainless steel box, holding a cardboard carton containing a framed photo of his daughter, a spare solenoid, and a bag of high-grade mechanical switches. When the doors opened, the lobby was bustling with the frantic energy of the IPO launch. Young analysts in slim-fit suits were running around with tablets, shouting about synergy and scalability. None of them noticed the man who had just been evicted from the engine room. Mr. Thorne, old Mike, the head of building security, stepped out from behind the desk. He looked at the deactivated badge of Elias, and then at the empty space around his neck where the brass key used to hang. "They let you go, sir?" Mike asked, his voice low. "After 30 years? Not just let go, Mike," Elias said, adjusting his grip on the box. Erased. "Do you need me to call a cab?" Elias shook his head. He looked at the massive digital clock on the wall above the reception. It read 3:14 p.m. "No, Mike. I am going to walk. But do me a favor. Do not use the ATMs tonight. And tell your wife to cash out her checking account before 5. Mike frowned, confused. "Is something wrong with the system?" Elias looked back at the elevator doors, imagining Julian 30 floors up, popping champagne over a burning fuse. "The system is fine, Mike." The pilot just jumped out of the plane. 30 floors up, the pilot was currently screaming at a monitor. "Red is not a brand color," Julian shouted, slamming his hand onto the glass conference table. "I told you to fix it." Sarah, the lead analyst, was trembling. She held her iPad like a shield. "Julian, we cannot fix a memory leak with a UI update. The manual flush did not happen at 3:14. The Tokyo buffer is already at 98% capacity. If we do not clear it physically, the overflow will spill into the London Exchange. I do not care about Tokyo." Julian grabbed a bottle of champagne from the ice bucket, the one he had opened with the key of Elias, and poured himself a glass. The liquid fizzed, a stark contrast to the stagnant, heavy air in the room. "I care about the board meeting at 7 p.m. I care about the gala at 8 p.m. And I care about the stock price at opening bell tomorrow." He turned to Brad, the junior coder who was frantically typing on a laptop. "Brad, write a script. Mask the input feed." Brad stopped typing. He looked up, his face pale. "Sir, you want me to fake the dashboard?" "I want you to normalize the data," Julian corrected, his voice dropping to a dangerous, silky whisper. "The old system is just adjusting. It is teething pains. We do not want to panic the investors with false positives, do we?" "But sir," Sarah interjected, her voice shaking, "that is illegal. Under the Sarbanes-Oxley Act and the Banking Secrecy Act, manipulating critical infrastructure reporting is a federal crime. If the system crashes, and we hid the warning signs." Julian spun around. He walked up to Sarah until he was looming over her. The smell of expensive cologne and cheap ambition was suffocating. "Sarah," Julian said, smiling. It was not a nice smile. "Do you like your job? Do you like your corner office? Do you like the bonus I promised you?" "Yes." "But then you will do exactly what I say. Elias is gone. There is no one left to check your homework. If the dashboard is red, the stock tanks, and we all lose our jobs. If the dashboard is green, we launch, we get rich, and we fix the glitch over the weekend when no one is watching." He turned back to Brad. "Do it. Paint it green. If I see a single pixel of red on that screen tonight, you are fired, and I will make sure you never work in tech again." Brad swallowed hard. He looked at Sarah. Sarah looked at the floor. "Yes, sir," Brad whispered. His fingers moved across the keyboard, typing the command that would seal their fate. "Command override UI mask. Target global status display. Set value 100% optimal. Execute." On the giant wall monitor, the angry, flashing red bars of the Tokyo Exchange flickered once, twice, and then settled into a calm, soothing, artificial green. See? Julian raised his glass, admiring the lie. Problem solved. That is what leadership looks like. We do not let the machines tell us what to do. We tell the machines what to be. 4 hours later, the sun had set over the city. The gala was beginning. In the basement, deep beneath the celebrating executives, the server room was getting hot. The cooling fans were spinning at maximum RPM, sounding like jet engines trying to take off. Inside the rack, the 1982 mechanism that Elias had tended to for 3 decades was groaning. Data packets were piling up like cars in a pileup. The buffer, a digital holding tank for billions of dollars, was full. It needed a physical key turned to release the pressure. It needed the human touch. Instead, it got silence. Upstairs, Julian was adjusting his bow tie in the mirror of the executive suite. He looked perfect. He felt invincible. He had fired the past, silenced the warnings, and painted over the cracks. "Mr. Julian?" Sarah knocked on the door. She looked sick. "The limousine is waiting. The board is already at the Pierre Hotel." "Excellent," Julian said, grabbing his jacket. He patted his pocket, feeling the plastic world's best boss keychain. He had kept the brass key as a trophy, a little souvenir of his victory over the old world. "Smile, Sarah," Julian said, breezing past her. "Tonight, we make history." Sarah did not smile. She looked at her phone. A notification from the internal server logs popped up. "Critical failure imminent. London node unresponsive." She looked at Julian's retreating back, then at the delete button on the notification. She hesitated. Then, with a trembling finger, she swiped the notification away, but she did not delete it. She forwarded it to a private external email address. Subject line: Insurance. The grand ballroom of the Pierre Hotel smelled of money and arrogance. On the 80-foot LED wall behind the stage, the Titan Cloud dashboard glowed in a perfect, soothing, fraudulent green. Julian stood at the podium, basking in the applause. The 1982 brass key was now clipped to his belt on a tacky plastic keychain that read "World's Best Boss." He tapped it against the microphone, a metallic thud-thud that echoed through the room. "Ladies and gentlemen," Julian beamed, his face flushed with triumph. "They told me you could not replace a 30-year-old legacy system in a single afternoon. They told me we needed safety buffers and manual overrides. They told me I needed a janitor with a magic key." He gestured to the side of the stage. 2 security guards pushed Elias into the spotlight. He was still wearing his grease-stained corduroy jacket, holding his box of personal belongings. He looked like a ghost at a wedding. "But look at the screen," Julian shouted, pointing to the wall of lies behind him. "Green across the board. Efficiency up 20%. And we did it by removing the one thing holding us back. Human error." The crowd laughed. It was a cruel, sycophantic sound. They clinked their glasses, celebrating the death of the old world. "Elias," Julian sneered, turning to the older man. "Do you have anything to say to the shareholders before security escorts you out of the building forever?" Elias looked at the crowd. Then he looked at Julian. Then he looked at the phones sitting on the tables. "Check your notifications," Elias said softly. Julian frowned.
Excuse me?
"The dashboard is green, Julian," Elias said, his voice carrying without a microphone. "But the London exchange closed 7 minutes ago, and nobody's phone has buzzed with a settlement confirmation." A murmur rippled through the room. A hedge fund manager in the front row frowned and tapped his screen. Then another. Then a woman in the back gasped. "My transfer is frozen," someone whispered. The London desk just went dark. Another voice said, louder this time. Julian's smile faltered. He tapped his earpiece. "Sarah, what is going on? Why are they complaining?" Sarah, standing in the wings with her iPad, did not answer. She was staring at the screen, her face pale. "It is a glitch," Julian shouted, recovering his composure. He pointed a trembling finger at Elias. "He did this. He planted a logic bomb before he left. He is trying to sabotage the IPO. Security, arrest him," Julian roared. "He is a cyber terrorist. He hacked the dashboard to hide his attack." I did not hack the dashboard, Julian, Elias said, stepping forward. You did. Liar, Julian screamed, slamming his fist onto the podium. I am the vice president. I am the… Actually, the voice cut through the chaos. You are a felon. Sarah stepped onto the stage. She was not looking at Julian. She was holding her iPad up to the camera that was broadcasting live to the world. He forced us to override the sensors, Sarah said, her voice shaking but clear. The system has been in critical failure for 4 hours. The green screen is a JPEG overlay. He threatened to fire us if we did not fake the report. The room exploded. The sound of glass shattering, the sound of phones ringing frantically, the sound of billions of dollars evaporating in real time. Julian stared at Sarah, betrayed. You little rat. I made you, and now you have unmade us all, Elias said. From the back of the room, the heavy double doors swung open. It was not the waiters. It was Mr. Vance, the chief risk auditor for the International Settlement Bank. Flanked by 4 federal agents, Vance walked through the crowd like Moses parting the Red Sea. He held a stopwatch in one hand and a thick file in the other. He stopped at the foot of the stage and looked up at Julian. Mr. Julian, Vance said, his voice cold as liquid nitrogen, per the Federal Banking Secrecy Act and the Critical Infrastructure Protection mandates, I am declaring this institution to be in a state of criminal negligence. You cannot do this, Julian sputtered, backing away until he hit the LED wall. The fake green screen flickered and died, revealing the truth underneath. A wall of screaming, bloody red bars. System critical. Hard lock initiated. The FBI is seizing your servers, Vance continued, checking his watch. And the SEC is seizing your assets. Your stock options are worth 0. Your bank accounts are frozen. You do not even own the tuxedo you are wearing. Julian looked at the red wall. He looked at the agents swarming the stage. He looked at the world's best boss keychain on his belt. His mind snapped. 0? Julian whispered. You think I am a 0? He grabbed a heavy crystal award from the podium. The Visionary of the Year trophy he had awarded himself an hour ago. I am the system, Julian screamed, his eyes rolling back in his head. I will delete it all. I will burn it down. He raised the trophy over his head, aiming not for the agents, but for the main fiber optic control panel embedded in the stage floor. He was going to physically sever the last connection to the world. Stop him, Vance shouted. But Elias did not move. He just watched. The crystal trophy shattered against the fiber optic panel. Sparks erupted in a violent, blinding shower of blue electric arcs. The Visionary of the Year award was now just jagged shards of glass embedded in the console. I deleted it, Julian screamed, his voice cracking into a high-pitched, inhuman wail. It is gone. If I cannot have the green screen, nobody gets the green screen. He turned, eyes wild, looking for something else to break. He saw Elias. You, Julian roared, pointing a bleeding finger. This is your fault. You and your antique junk. You infected my cloud. He lunged off the stage, aiming for the throat of Elias, but he never made it. 2 federal agents hit him midair. The impact was sickening, a wet thud of expensive silk hitting cheap carpet. Julian hit the floor hard, sliding across the polished marble. One of his Italian leather loafers flew off, skidding toward the feet of the CEO like a hockey puck. Get off me, Julian shrieked, kicking and thrashing as the agents pinned his arms behind his back. Do you know who I am? I am the system. I am the future. Elias did not flinch. He walked slowly toward the pile of struggling bodies. Julian was foaming at the mouth now, his face pressed against the floor, spitting insults at the carpet. I will sue you, Julian gargled. I will buy this building and burn it down. Elias stopped. He looked down at the belt of the screaming man. The cheap plastic world's best boss keychain was still there, trembling with the spasms of Julian. Without a word, Elias reached down. He did not ask. He did not hesitate. He grabbed the brass key and yanked. The cheap plastic snapped instantly. Julian gasped, trying to twist his head to see. That is mine, Julian screamed, tears mixing with the snot on his face. "Give it back! It is company property!" Elias looked at the brass key in his hand. It was dirty, it was tarnished, but it was still the only thing that mattered. He wiped it on his sleeve, removing the fingerprints of the usurper. "No, Julian," Elias said, his voice cutting through the madness. "It is a tool, and you do not know how to use tools." He turned and walked away. "Mr. Thorne," the CEO of the bank scrambled out from under a table, his tie askew. "Elias, please. The system is hard-locking. We are losing 10 million a second. If you fix this, name your price. We will give you the VP spot. We will give you the office of Julian." Elias did not stop. He walked past the CEO, past the weeping board members, and past the stunned Sarah, who was recording everything on her phone. "I do not want an office," Elias said, pressing the button for the service elevator. "Then what do you want?" the CEO begged. The elevator doors opened. Elias stepped into the steel box. He looked at the chaos one last time. The screaming man, the red screens, the panicked billionaires. "I want silence," Elias said. The doors closed. 2 minutes later, the server room was flashing red. The heat was intense. The Titan cloud was dead. Elias walked to the main rack. He placed his cardboard box on the floor and took out his backup keyboard, a beige, ugly, beautiful IBM Model M that he had kept in his locker for 20 years. He plugged it into the emergency port. The green light on the keyboard flickered to life. Elias took the brass key. He inserted it into the manual override lock. It fit perfectly, with a satisfying heavy thunk. He turned it to the right. The red flashing stopped. The fans began to slow down. The angry hum of the dying servers faded into a steady, rhythmic purr. Elias cracked his knuckles. He looked at the command prompt blinking on the screen, awaiting input. He did not type a code. He did not type a complex algorithm. He just typed the one thing Julian had tried to kill. Clack, clack. As the mechanical keys clicked, Elias could faintly hear the sirens wailing 30 floors above. It was the sound of a false god being dragged away. Then, the screen flashed. System restored. Elias sat back in his broken chair, closed his eyes, and listened. The heartbeat was back. The world was safe. And upstairs, the screaming had finally stopped.
Watching Julian lose his mind over a missing shoe, while his billion-dollar vision turned into a pile of broken glass, was pure poetry. It's funny how the people who scream the loudest about the future are usually the ones who can't even handle a physical key. But let's be real, if you were in Elias's shoes, would you have taken that desperate bribe for a VP seat at the end? Or is walking away with your dignity the only real victory here? Just a little secret from the writing desk, I originally planned for Julian to trip over the trash can. But I realized seeing him dragged away with one bare foot was a much more humiliating touch for a high-status executive.